We've seen in Mathematica that when we want to run some code, we enter it in an input cell, and then we select that cell and hold down Shift and press Enter to evaluate that code. So for example, in this input cell, I have the command random word with no arguments. I click inside the input cell, hold down Shift and press Enter. It goes out to the server to get some information, and then it chooses a random word, which is, in this case, re-elect. Now, one of the things we notice is that if we look over on the left-hand margin, we can see that input and output cells are numbered, so that the output re-elect is numbered 113 in my notebook. If I want to refer to a previous output, I can use the out command like this, and it shows me the word re-elect, which was the last output. I can also do the same thing by using the %, which is the shorthand notation for the out command, re-elect. And if I want, I can also use a command like out and then give it an argument, say 115, and in this case it's going to give me output 115, which was the word re-elect. Now, in general, I don't recommend using the out command. It's very important to know how it works so that you can read the Mathematica documentation, because it's used there very frequently. But in your own notebooks, it's a good way to get confused about what happened when, and so in general, it's better to be explicit about what you're referring to and not just try to use some shorthand that refers to something that happened previously. And this is especially true if you're working across multiple notebooks or if you're jumping around in your notebook trying to figure something out. When we select an output cell, there is the possibility of doing further actions, and Mathematica suggests these with a suggestions bar. So for example, this next command here gives me a table of 3 random words. So I click in the input cell, I hold down Shift and press Enter or Return, and it gives me 3 random words. Now notice over to the right hand side there's this little down arrow here that says Show Suggestions Bar. When I click on that, it opens up this little bar that lets me do other things. So for example, if I wanted to sort that list in alphabetical order, I could click Sort, and it would give me this. If I want to do something further, for example, like say print these out in columns, I could try this column formatting, and so on. So the suggestions bar is a good way of finding new things that you might do with a particular output, and it's based on things that other people have done with similar outputs in the past. If you're not sure what a command does, you can use the information command to get more information about it. So for example, if we know that there's a command called reverse, we can say, give me information about reverse, and it gives us this nice little display telling us how to use the expression. The shorthand for the information command is just to use a question mark and then the name of the command we're interested in. Question mark random word gives me information about the random word command. If I were to click this little blue eye here, it's going to open up Mathematica documentation and tell me all about the reverse command. The documentation in Mathematica is fantastic. Not only does it give us information about how to use the command, but it shows us examples. We can copy code from the documentation and try it in our own notebooks and so on. If we just enter some text into an input cell, Mathematica formats it in blue. And what that means is it means this is something that I don't understand yet. So for example, when I type in the word foobar, Mathematica doesn't know what that is, so it just colors it as blue. If I hit Shift and Enter on one of these blue undefined symbols, it's just going to give me the name of the thing because it doesn't know what to do with it. If we use an expression where we have an equal sign with an undefined symbol on the left and some kind of a command on the right, when we evaluate that, it's going to run the command on the right and then assign the results, the output of that expression, to the symbol on the left. And as soon as we do that, it's going to change color. It's not going to be blue anymore. Let's see what that looks like. I go Shift Enter to evaluate. And now random integer between 1 and 10 gives me a random whole number between 1 and 10. It shows 5 in this case. But now that 5 has been assigned to sample number, and sample number is now black because it has a definition. Every time I evaluate sample number, it returns 5 because that's what's stored inside of it. Now if I were to run the random integer command again, it gives me a 4 this time, and again, gives me a 6 this time, and so on. Every time I run random integer, it's giving me a new number, whole number, between 1 and 10. But sample number always has the same value unless I clear it. So when I use the clear command, it gets rid of the value of sample number, the symbol turns blue, and if I try to evaluate the symbol, it just gives me its name because Mathematica doesn't know what it is. It's very important that you pay attention to the undefined symbols in your code because they can often be an indicator that something has not been defined that you expect to be defined. Let's do this again. This time I'm going to choose a random whole number, an integer, between 13 and 21, and I'm going to assign it to sample number, but I don't want Mathematica to show me the output. So I put a semicolon at the end of the cell like this. When I say Shift-Enter, sample number changes to black because Mathematica now knows what it is, but the output has been suppressed. Notice that the new value is now in there. Let me hit Shift and Enter to see what it is. 19. Every time I type in sample number and evaluate it, it's going to give me 19. If I say clear, it's going to remove that value, and sample number becomes blue again. And now if I type it in, I hit Shift and Enter, and Mathematica just gives me its name. Now sometimes I don't want code to be evaluated, and the way that I stop that from happening is by turning it into a comment. So say I have an expression like this, 2 plus 2. We know that if we evaluate that expression, Mathematica will return the answer 4. If I don't want that code to be evaluated, I can choose the cell and hold down Command and hit // or in Windows, I could right-click on the expression and it will comment it out. There are a number of places in the text where I comment out code so that it won't be executed automatically. If you want to evaluate it, you have to turn off the comments, and then you can evaluate the expression just like anything else. Now, Mathematica also allows ways to enter a number of different characters, unusual input characters. And one of these ways is if we go up to the menu, we can choose palettes. And then there's a palette called Special Characters. And when we choose that, it opens up a new little menu that allows us to enter special characters in there. So for example, if I wanted to enter an accented letter, for example, choose the accented letters. If I press one of these characters, it enters it into my notebook, as you can see. I'm going to close the Special Character palette. If you want to enter symbols, it's over in this tab. If you want to enter things, other kinds of mathematical expressions, there are palettes for each of those things too. So close that, return to the notebook and delete this cell, select it and hit delete. It's possible for you to put a number of expressions into a single input cell, but this is usually a good way to get confused. I've got an example here that you should study carefully and try figuring out what it's going to do, and then figure out how it works. If you want to divide that cell into multiple cells, we can make a copy of it. Command C or Control C on Windows. Insert it down here, Command V or Control V. Now if I want to break it up, remember I just put my cursor where I need to divide the cell, and then I can use the menu and choose Cell, Divide Cell to create a new cell format. Cell, divide cell again, and now if I look at those three things, I can see that each one of them is a separate cell. We can check that on the brackets to the right. It's also possible to evaluate a bunch of commands at once by choosing a larger cell bracket, like this, and then using Shift and Enter to evaluate all of the code inside that cell. If I'm working through a notebook, I make sure to evaluate each cell as I come to it so that things that are defined at that point will be available later on in the lesson.